everybody, it's Patty Dobrovolsky with Up Your Creative Genius, and I have one of my favorite illustrators in the world on this call today, on this podcast, Wade Forbes. Now, I met Wade because of the great Sonny Brown brought us all together for this facilitation event, and he was going to draw, and I thought, oh, that's great. So I don't have to draw. I could just be a facilitator there. That's fantastic. And there were 6 other facilitators, and Wade, he did such a beautiful drawing. So you're an illustrator, a visual thinker, really smart guy. You have RedTale Communications, which you started in February of 2020 with your wife and partner. And this is just so great to have you here today. I know that we're going to talk a lot about things, you know, that we love, which are pictures and images, and how that impacts people. But for those of you that are listening for the first time, this guy can really bring whatever meeting you're in to life by drawing a beautiful picture of it. He's also a great and highly skilled facilitator, but I know him best as the Wade who actually draws on Instagram, and he'll draw these beautiful pictures, one of whom I've printed out and put up on my whiteboard with magnets because it's so incredible. So Wade, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Patty. I'm so excited to be here. It's funny to have been the guy who was talking a lot in his career as a facilitator and now is quiet as an illustrator. You have brought me back out of my shell a little bit by inviting me on today. So thank you.
I can't wait. Now, Wade, tell everybody a little bit about your history, because you weren't always a graphic recorder. You started doing that recently. So, but you've always been an illustrator. So tell us a little bit about what you did before and how you got into doing and becoming a visual thinker.
So I have a really non-traditional background. I was an art major a long time ago, and I kept hearing about all these jobs that I didn't want to do. I didn't necessarily want to be an art teacher. I didn't want to be a graphic artist and using all the software. So when I didn't hear those things, I took a huge, we'll call it a U-turn into cybersecurity. I spent 17 years consulting with the military in cybersecurity. And towards the end of that time, Patty, my bosses didn't have time to read what I wrote. I'm writing all these papers, and my job was think like the enemy, the coolest thing you could do. I'm doing all the alternative analysis. Wow. And I realized that if I drew a picture, I'd have a much better conversation. So wow. Shortly after I discovered graphic recording, I trained with some great people like Stacy Hall at Doodle Tunes and Brian Torillo at Lizard Brain. And they showed me how to do this great thing that I didn't know existed. And whammo, 4.5 years later, I'm drawing in meetings with you and Sonny Brown and other people, you know, doing the facilitation. I'm just the happiest I've ever been.
Oh my God. Well, I love that you were a cybersecurity geek, because, and now of course, you know, I want to ask you all about that, which you won't be able to talk about because it was the military. So it's top secret, right? But did you ever draw a cartoon to help with what you were writing about?
Yes, I did. So I would take very unpopular things to talk about and draw about them and leave them places all around these military bases where I worked, so that when people were having their coffee or walking by, they could just stand and dwell on the picture, and it actually brought these conversations to life. And the neat part was some people knew who I was and some people didn't. And it was just perfect because it wasn't about me. It was about this idea, very much like in graphic recording. You're holding the space. It's not about you, but it's about representing what's going on so that people can get to a better destination.
Yes. And you said before that you know, we're often talking, and then now you get to just listen all the time. I actually love it when I'm sometimes just hired to draw, and because I'm listening and I am so verbal all the time in my head and out here in the world, that it's so great to just shut up and listen, right? What have you learned about yourself and other people by shifting from talking to this listening state?
I think even in this conversation, I'm listening to every word you say differently than before when I was getting paid to talk, right? I mean, I'm a consultant. I have to look out over the landscape and kind of provide this analysis and these updates. And I didn't always have an answer I was really excited about. Whereas now when I'm drawing, And I can say, here's a snapshot in time. Here's where we were, June 2023. This is what we knew. This is what we didn't know. This is what we wanted to do, what we didn't want to do.
Wow.
It feels much more helpful in a way than
Yeah.
giving you 5 paragraphs. I could say, look
Yeah.
at this thing and you can come back to it later if it's not a good time.
Yes. Well, I love that even right behind you have all those pictures on the wall, which you've drawn, those little tiny pictures. How big are they? For those of you who are just tuning into the podcast part, not the visual, these are small. They look like they're like on a, what size is that, Wade?
These are 3x3 Post-it notes, Patty.
Oh, wow.
And at the very beginning, I'd say about a year before the pandemic, I'd go to work and there was a coffee shop at work and everybody was always really high strung and stressed out. And I said, what can I do to shift the mood in this place where I work? And I started ordering my medium coffee, cream and sugar with a shot of espresso, and attaching the Post-it note to my mug and handing it across the counter to these baristas. And they would stop what they were doing. They would smile. They would tell me stories. They would share their dreams. They would say, I never dreamed of working at a Dunkin' Donuts at a military base, but I'm caring for my mother's health who's failing. Or I'm a single mom putting myself through school and I'm working to improve my situation. I said, how can I help these people that are just like me trying to get their way in the world? And I would give them these Post-it notes every day. Then the pandemic comes, bam. And I said, what can I do to see hope someplace else instead of all the negativity and the scary stuff? And
Yes.
I started drawing one of these every single day, every weekday. And I have upwards of 800 of them right now. You know, they're all around the room. I've put them in albums. I've sold some. I've been in art shows, and it's just really this notion of the little things add up to something great, Patty. That's the biggest takeaway I can give you from that.
I love that, Wade, because I really, with like you know, during the pandemic, I would just come up with these things like 20 things to do to overcome COVID, or I'd get on and do like a lip sync to some song that would show, you know, try to box your way through COVID, and just to inspire people. But I love that these are, in a way, it's a legacy and a history of that time. It's a reflection of you. But you're such an incredible illustrator that I mean, honestly, to have a wall of all of those would be amazing, to be able to see them all in one place. So I hope that you will do something like that so people can see them. And where, first off, like, where can people right away see you on Instagram? What's your Instagram handle? Tell us.
Just at Wade Forbes, all lowercase, no space, at Wade
Okay.
Forbes. I'm a thinker who draws. So the story behind the thinker who draws was, you know, I'm not just a consultant, I'm not an artist. I can bring those worlds together. And I didn't know how else to describe it. So I said, maybe I'll try this thinker who draws. And people get really engaged and they want to learn more, especially when I post on LinkedIn and I call myself that. But for now, that's what I am, because who
Yeah.
knows what my career is going to be in another 5 years, because 4 years ago, I was sitting in a cubicle and now I sit
Yes.
in my house and I draw every day.
Well, now, Wade, how did you transition to that? I mean, was that scary for you to make that kind of a leap or change? What did you do to get yourself, your mind in the right space so you could do it without being completely freaked out? Because, you know, people want to change themselves all the time, but they usually don't because they're afraid.
Great question. So my wife, Megan, and I started RedTale Communications, and the thought behind it back in 2019. We were both government contractors, and we said, what happens if we lose our income? My wife was in the environment. I was in the Department of Defense. And the irony was we were expecting environment to get more cuts than military. And then COVID hit, bam, my military contract goes away, no subcontractors, and I'm done. So had I not been doing some of this graphic recording and training on the side, I would have been in big trouble. And lo and behold.
So you did some preparation first, right? You knew that you were going to transition into something. So you got skilled up in something else. Okay, good. Keep going. And bam.
So I was, bam, transition. I was still a little chicken. I knew it was coming, but I wouldn't have done it in March 2020. And so now these Post-it notes take on another life of their own. I didn't have a portfolio, Patty. I didn't have all these examples of the things I was capable of. So I said to myself, how do I surround myself with artwork so I believe that I'm an artist? And you talk a lot about this in your coaching. You know, what are the things that we say to ourselves? What are we telling ourselves every single day in our self-talk? I said, I need to make that portfolio. I need to see that artwork so that I believe that that's what I can bring to the equation when people have these difficult conversations or hire me for these sessions and need that source of inspiration. I had to see it and I didn't have it. And so here now 800, 900 post-it notes later, it's there.
Well, that is another amazing piece because, I'm always talking about that you want to put the vision up there in front of you. Well, the vision for you was that you would have the self-esteem to step into that role with confidence and that you would believe that about yourself. And that is an amazing way to do it, to enforce it in yourself. I love that. That's so self-reflective. And it's also a great tip for me. I'm like, because often, I'll say to people in a meeting, like, if you want to come up with 100 ideas or a good idea, make yourself write 100 ideas on Post-it notes and just put every bad idea up there and then just combine them, mix and match and pull them together and see what you can come up with and from that consortium. And I bet you, even if you looked at all of those Post-its that you've done, there must be some thematic content. Is there?
Great question. So a lot of conversations are around DEI right now and JEDI work. How do we start to make progress in those areas? So you're going to see a lot of DEI themes that go through some of my quotes because I've been in a session, I hear people wrestling and I hear them stuck and where do they go next? And I found that we weren't really making the time to dwell on those topics. So how could I create something that would last? These little Post-it notes, these little time-lapse videos that I put on my Instagram, sometimes people go back 9, 18 months to a quote that I did and it resonated with them. And Instagram's kind of annoying because you can't search it, but you can scroll down through somebody's profile and see those things. And I've just been really fortunate that I keep staying in places where I need that growth and other people need it too. I think as an artist, we sometimes get stuck in our own heads, but every time I draw one of these things, I hear, I needed that today, or I've been thinking about that too. And so I think as artists, that's part of our role.
Yes, is to inspire people to reflect back to them. Yes, this is the reality we live in, and here's another way of looking at it, or here's the way I'm looking at it. See what you think. I think that's so cool. Now, Wade, but how did you understand what to do with business? Because you worked in this other sector where your business was provided to you. So what'd you do to bring up your skills in that area of running a business?
Great question. In order to get myself confident to do graphic recording on my own, I looked to see who was doing it and who needed help. And I went and I worked with those people and I took what I saw and I said, I can do that, or I don't think I want to do that. Yeah. And after being on that pilgrimage with these other graphic recording greats here in the DC metro area, I started getting calls on my own. And then that's where I was really able to kind of take off. And so now I still do work for other people like I've done for you at times when it pops up. And there's times where you've got that relationship and it's great and you just need me to show up. And then there's other times where I want to own the whole thing. And so I've been very fortunate that this is a really welcoming industry. I'm not finding people that are hoarding their work or that want to not see others succeed. I actually see people welcoming as many graphic recorders in because the more of us that are working, the better it is for the conversations that we're enhancing.
Well, and not just that, but I remember when I started, there weren't that many. So I'd go into, one of these big corporate firms and, they would say, I'd draw for them. And then they'd say, yeah, we really don't have the budget for something like that, but can you leave that drawing here? And I'd be like, see, you want the drawing, but you don't know that what its value is yet. Now, the more people there are in the field, the more value it brings to and credibility to it, to that kind of work. And I think that's important too. Now, Wade, we met in this way, but also, recently your dad transitioned out of the world and you've been doing a whole lot of self-reflection about that. How did you use your art to help you process what was going on and your sadness?
Thank you for asking, Patty. My dad died on May 12th, very peacefully in his favorite chair, and learned from the nurses later that he had snuck a second dessert. And every time I tell that, everybody smiles and it helps me not burst into tears. But the grief process for me has been a roller coaster, as it is for many people. And it's that moment where we connect, because many of us, as we grow older, lose a parent, and we all do it in different ways. And drawing through the grief process, there's been a lot of water, which I'm fascinated with as an artist. There's lots of water back here, and a lot of the quotes, there's lots of people standing on docks, looking out over the horizon. And to create something beautiful, that self-care
Yeah.
daily for the
Yeah.
last
Yeah.
1300, I mean 1600 days, when something big and tough pops up, our natural tendency is to abandon our self-care and say, oh, I got to take a break, I can't do this. But what I did instead was say, no, I'm going to draw through this. And I'm probably in a lot better shape than I would have been otherwise if I hadn't been doing that self-care all along. So now back to, what are we doing to take care of ourselves? You
Yeah.
can't just like whammo find it on the bad day or when the really horrible thing happens. You have to be doing a little bit of something all along over time. And so these replaced my commute. I wasn't driving to the military base anymore for an hour or an hour and a half, 2 hours a day. Now I can draw these and I have something really meaningful at the end.
Well, and you're speaking to the power of drawing and the reflective process, right? So I was trained as a drama therapist, but I took art therapy as part of my coursework, and I loved it. In fact, there is where I think I learned the most about myself. Because drama I knew, and I knew the drama I had, and I worked through it. That's part of what drama therapy is all about. But the visual part of it, I could really read a room so much better when I went in and they would draw, and then I could understand, oh, that's what they're dealing with, or oh, that person is a little fragile right now, or oh, yeah, that person is probably got a disorder that I want to watch out for so that I don't say anything or do anything that might trigger them in this session. And I think this is us, when we draw pictures, even when we're drawing for somebody else, we are hearing, talk about that process too, because I hear those things, they come out through me, and then I don't try to censor what I draw. I just draw whatever appears in my head. How do you do that process, and what's it like for you? Because you're a skilled illustrator. Now, I was just a hack illustrator. Now I'm skilled in some ways, but I never had the interference of, is it good enough? Because I knew it wasn't good enough. I was just going to draw it anyway, right? So
Great.
what's out for you?
So I remember when I got into graphic recording, people said draw TED Talks. And that's almost terrifying because they're so tightly scripted and there's no fluff. And the
Yeah.
beauty of graphic recording is you're listening to a conversation that's unfolding very slowly in many cases. Nobody has that tight script in these 8-hour sessions. If they did, we'd all quit because we'd say, I can't keep up. It's not any good. So once I learned that I was drawing people reflecting and thinking out loud, I could find that core idea, draw it, and then capture the voice track around it. And then when I remind people, it's like, look, I was drawing on slide 35. I took a quick picture to get that graphic you wanted to tie you back in. I could see that that voice track is what people are craving later when they get back to their desk 3 weeks after the session and really need to go back in. I've drawn in sessions where English is not the first language, and the people can say to me, I'm going to take back 60 or 70% more of a memory because of these pictures, because I can't process English as quickly as I'm processing Vietnamese or, other, or Spanish or Korean or other languages that these people primarily speak. So I think what it's like to go in that trance and you're listening and you're trying to pull up your visual vocabulary in your head and what you can draw quickly. And I think sessions like I did with you and Sunny, I got better at saying, this is what I know I want to draw here, and I'm going to capture that voice track around it. That planning in advance has really changed my work.
Yeah, that's good. One of what he's talking about here is that I said to him, maybe pencil out the drawing where you think it's going to go when you talk to the keynote speaker. And he's like, I've never done that before. I've never penciled it in advance. I'm like, oh my God, that's the only way I could do it. But mainly that's because I was trying to I didn't have a visual vocabulary. I think when you're trained as an illustrator, you have one. You have a visual vocabulary of things that drop in, and you know how to draw a rocket, you know how to draw, a building, you know how to draw stepping stones going off into the distance, right? And so for me, it was about pulling up. I mean, I would actually take people's drawings into the room, people who had drawn other things, and I would cheat off their thing. I'd be, oh, well, they drew that. Okay, that's what I'm going to draw for this. And I would write a word first and then draw the picture. Because if I drew the picture, I would have missed like half of what they were saying because I wasn't that fast early on. Now I can do pretty much both, but you're really skilled at just enhancing the imagery in such a way that it stood out. Like I remember standing at the back of the room, watching the evolution of you were drawing a mountain or clouds. It was like so beautiful. And I thought, oh my God, I have to go up close and look at that. Like, how did he do that? And even when I watch in your Instagram, you coloring those things so quickly. Of course, you have it on speed time, but still, I think, wow, he saw that facial color and then he added that here and then he blended them together. And so now it's this beautiful mosaic of color and person and expression, and then the writing of whatever the quote is over it. I mean, I have gone back and studied how you've done it many times because I'm fascinated with it.
Mm.
So what would you say to someone who doesn't know how to draw? What would you tell them to do if they're needing a daily practice that might involve some drawing? How would you get them started?
So it's interesting you say that. My 11-year-old is a great artist, great illustrator. He is already very, very much further along than I was at his age. And my number one piece of advice is draw what you see. So if you are in one of my graphic recording sessions and you see me holding up my phone, I'm not checking my text messages. I'm looking at that person reaching out, and I'm looking at the angle of their hand and what the
Yes.
thumb looks like and the fingers. And here's where the Post-it notes come in. Patty, if I'm looking at what is it like with a close-up of an eye and what they see, you know that I've drawn 20 eyes in the last 3 years,
Right.
up and close, what it looks like to have the moisture in the eyeball so you get that
Yes.
white.
Yeah.
Drawing different flesh was something I had to do as a white man. I had to say, wait a second, I've drawn my own white, pale ginger flesh my whole life. There are
Yeah.
other flesh tones that need to be represented in the room. And
Yeah.
that and when people come up to you at the end of the session and say, I see myself, you're like, whoo, that is what it's
Nailed it.
all
Nailed it.
about. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think the advice I have to budding artists or people that want to find that peace and that solace and that self-care is to just draw what you see and get the repetition in, and start with something hard like hands, because
Yeah.
everybody loves to see a cool hand, and that is
Yeah.
hard, but just draw your left hand as much as you can. I have a really fat thumb, so it's funny, all my left hand drawings have this fat thumb if I'm drawing from life. But yeah,
I love
that's
that. I would sit on the airplane, and that's what I would make myself do. As people would pass by, I'd sketch them as quickly as I could. I'd sketch the chairs and the ceilings, where you put your luggage and all of that, all of the equipment that was there, because I'm trying to understand spatial awareness and how do the corners come together. And, you just train yourself to see more of what's in the room. And the amazing thing about it, I think, for anybody who's listening, who doesn't draw, and you think, I just draw stick figures, I would say, drawing something that you see in front of you brings you into the present moment at a whole other level that you will be shocked and surprised. You'll be like, wow, I can see that lamp casing has like a fold in it. And I wonder how I could do that with like my pencil. How could I create that on a piece of paper? And it changes how you engage with the environment. It changes. I know when I was training with Scott Ward, my favorite thing to do is to have him, do the studio version and me be there. I'll write the words because I want my handwriting, although his is very good. But then when he's drawing, I'm thinking, wow, like, look at that. And, he has his own unique style, just like you do, just like I do. So anybody that's listening, you're going to find your own style. And as basic as it is, your style begins to emerge. And the more you practice, the better you get. And the more fun you get to have. Wouldn't you agree?
I agree. You're bringing up an excellent point. I think when we have to do something, when we want to do something we've never done, we have to put ourselves with people that have already done it that can help. So just like going into
Getting a
graphic
mentor.
recording,
Yeah.
When I was sitting in a room full of cybersecurity engineers, it was really hard to imagine opening a business and doing this stuff on my own. So I had to go and be with the people that were doing what I
You
wanted
wanted to
to
be
do.
secure in all ways. You were like, yeah, how's this going to go?
Well,
I could get hacked. My life could get hacked.
things were going well. I mean, I had a
Yeah.
secure job forever if I wanted it until
Yeah.
I didn't. And then to spend time with other people that were already doing it and could encourage me was going to be
Yeah.
key for that. So I think you bring up a great point. I have a story to tell. I was drawing, I worked in a place called Cyber Command, and it's the military's place where they help deal with threats on the internet against our national security. So
Yes.
very, very intense at times. And I was drawing with dry erase markers on butcher paper. And a dear friend, Rome Wilson of Outside Leatherwork, searched the command to find me. And he said, this man has too many skills to not be using the right illustration markers. And he got me the equipment I needed. I have 500 Prismacolor markers here in my office that I draw with every day. So I think, when somebody can see your talent and help you, you got to get the gear. So Rome said, come here, I want to show you my kit. And he opens up his kit and it's zippered and it's got all these cool markers in it. He's got the grays. So when you're on the airplane, like you're saying, he's pulling out his kit and he can draw that thing right there in that beautiful sketchbook. And now he's got all of his concepts for all of his outside leather work.
Yeah.
And he was an inspiration to me. He's found me in 2018. I got my markers. I started drawing really clumsily in meetings. And then I found out graphic recording was a thing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, where have I been? I've been in the office with the cybersecurity engineers and I couldn't find the other
You've
thing.
been locked in a box, Wade, but now, Wade, you're free.
Thank goodness.
Free to fly. That's fantastic. Now, I want to, I always ask on the podcast, what do you see for your future? Like if we could wave a magic wand and you could step into any future that you want to create for yourself, 3, 5, 10 years from today, what's that look like? Even next year, what would it look like for you?
So I've always had this thing about covering the walls. It's ironic that my walls are covered here in my office, but there's just too many white, boring walls where we go. And I have clients now that are taking down their what I would say boring office art and actually hanging my stuff on the walls. I've got more opportunities to do murals. So I really believe, Patty, that I see some semblance of multimedia even in my graphic recording. What is the thing that's happening in the session that we need to see on the sidewalk when we walk into the building every morning so that we're in the mindset and we remember what we're all about? Like that would be a dream come true, that I've got these little things. I've got my graphic recording, I've got my sketchnoting, and then I've got my sidewalk mural that is really putting a nice bow on that session or that strategic initiative or that way that we need to connect differently. There's a company that is really interested in my quotes right now to help connect the corporate to the workers in the plant. It's a food company. And you have the people in the office building, and there's a tension sometimes. And how can we reduce that tension by getting them to connect on these different ideas? So 5, 10 years, I think I'm not working too hard because this is taxing on our bodies, as you and I have talked about, get the regular massages. And I'm doing it for the right purpose. I think to give our creativity away to a purpose that makes the world better feels much more rewarding than doing it for any old thing. So what's great is some of these things are actually revealing, like maybe we do need to think about our purposes and is it big enough? Is it good enough? Is it wholesome enough? Or does it just benefit the people at this table?
Yeah.
So I'm thinking all those
I
things.
love this. So, and what I know to be true is that you went and did a job for me. And when you were there, you actually extended what you did and you drew on the board where they were getting their beer, right? And to me, this is what you're talking about. You're talking about a unified experience where from the moment we walk in, we see the quote, or the quote is a reflection of something that somebody said early in the day, that it shows up on the wall. And that's a reminder to us in the hallways of where we work, that we are beautiful, that our voice matters, that we are here to make a difference in the world, and that reflective art that you're creating really gives and makes space for people to, I don't know, be seen and heard in a way that elevates them, so that we can all be equal in that space and contribute to the betterment of any environment we're in. I mean, I can't thank you enough for taking time to talk to me. We are going to do this again. What else would you like to add before we close our fantastic podcast?
I think, you kind of just brought it full circle with me describing that experience with that client. And I think we're just looking for those doses, just like what's behind you right now. Up your creative genius, got a rocket blasting off. It's not something that's so heavy that I can't look at that and reflect and feel good. So where are we getting those doses of things throughout the day? And it's usually from pictures of some sort, some visual that catches our eye. And I
Yes.
think that if I can create as many of those as possible so that the graphic recorders in our world are not the only people that are getting those doses, and then all those other people can be amplified and doing those really great things. That's
Yeah.
really the goal. It's not about the money in some regards. It's about surviving, but it's not about the money. It's really about how do we all get that dose of hope so that we can get out of that spiral that sometimes is easy to
That
get
we
in.
get into and up our creative genius in
Yep.
all many, many ways. Well, you certainly have upped my creative genius today, Wade. And if you please would follow at Wade Forbes on Instagram, you're going to be so blown away by his drawings. And I'm just blown away by you. I appreciate you so much in the conversations that we've had over these months. We don't really know each other that well, but we've had some very deep conversations and I've appreciated everyone. So big shout out to Sunny Brown for bringing us together because that was a cool thing. So
Yeah.
everybody, please tune in. Wade, thank you again for being here. And we'll look forward to seeing all of you soon. Get out there, make it a great day, everybody.